Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us during Fluttershyne's Virtual College Week. My name is Nashla Dawari, and I will be facilitating today's session, The Big Transition, All You Need to Know to Balance the Change into the College Journey. Now, before I begin, I want to go over a few items with you. If you have any questions, please put them in the question box, and we will address them during the live Q&A at the end of the presentation. Closed captioning is provided for this session, so you can click on the link provided in the chat box. This session will be recorded, and the recorded session, along with all the materials and the presentation from today, will be posted on our website at floridaShines.org. And finally, we are live on Twitter, so feel free to share your comments and connect with us at FL Shines. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Aisha Gordon. Aisha has worked with Florida International University for 7 years, and during her time there, she's focused on creating initiatives and procedures that prepare a diverse group of incoming students. She believes that the name of the game is early detection and preparation when ensuring student success. And I love that, Aisha. We are very excited to hear from you today and learn best tips for managing this transition into college and learn about the big change. So the floor is all yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to speak to you all today. I know we have about 20 individuals here, and I just want to let you know that this is a very informal time. I know when we talk a lot about student success, and maybe you've been to a couple of the other presentations here, you're getting bogged down with a lot of information. So I'm hoping to speak to you informally, let you know what is necessary to know and focus when it comes to the transition to college. So what you'll notice, the name of today's presentation is Your Transition to College, because what you probably expected was maybe of how do you help your student transition from high school to college. But I wanted to let you know that not only your student is going through transition, but you as a family member, as a parent maybe. So let's delve into that a little bit more. So why are we here? Today, just to break it down, we're going to be reflecting on a lot of your concerns, and definitely be free, use that chat box, because what your concerns are is really what's going to drive a lot of this presentation. So I hope I can give you what you need and what's based off of your situation. We're also going to be exploring the transition process in the whole. We're going to be sharing examples of their social, emotional aspects, academic transitions in order to prepare not only your student, but also yourself. And then lastly, we're going to get into some practicals. We're going to be jumping in more so in how you can support your student through this transition. So before I begin, I think it's pertinent to say that your concerns are valid. If you notice this cartoon here, where we see first day of school, and then the change of first day of college, what has been the most challenging aspect of being a parent of a senior or a family member or guardian of that senior going to college? Definitely add that to the chat box. Think of it yourself, because as we talk about the transition as a whole, I just want to first and foremost explain and understand that your concerns are necessary, but then there's always a solution. So change is always just around the corner. For your student, for yourself, it feels like this big change is forever. I'm happy to say it is temporary. But not only is your student going through, not only are you going through this transition, but your student is also. First and foremost, they're taking part in a world which has new rules, new expectations. Unfortunately, what you might have noticed is maybe that they might be acting out on their anxieties. They're extremely sensitive to criticism. They have to learn this managing of their money and their time and their relationships on their own. And then lastly, and almost more importantly, they're trying to figure out and navigating knowing when to get help. So what does this transition look like? You know that you've been feeling some of the growing pains of this transition, but let's really delve into it, because I believe if we put a face to this, then you can more effectively build an action plan in helping both you and your student. So first and foremost, your student's going through things that are social and emotional based. So they're exploring their competencies. They're asking themselves questions like, can I really do this? I mean, do I fit in? Will I make the team? Facets of their identity are questioned. Who am I separate from my family? Who am I as an adult, away from my parents? And then lastly, they are making their first choices when it comes to examining what they value. What is the right thing for me to do? Another transition that I know we talk about, but I really want to really harp on during this part of the presentation, because in reality, you and probably many others around your student is telling them you have to plan ahead, you have to plan ahead. And unfortunately, what happens? We don't plan ahead. In reality, most of the time, think about it. Academically, your high school student goes through 30 to 35 hours per week in class. When it's college, that's only 16 to 18 hours per week, maybe. So 2/3 of seniors spend less than 6 hours per week studying. That's very different for college. So even during this transition, I know you're probably reminding them to do things, telling them about certain things that need to be done, deadlines to meet. Understand that this wasn't a part of life before. So some of the things that are more deadline driven and important to take care of, the value might not be there. And then a second part that I've seen when it comes to this transition in this first year, not only academic, that is a shock to seniors who transition, but wellness overall. Sleep difficulties are actually within the top 3 factors impacting performance with our students. And I think it's more alarming that we don't prepare them for that, how to take care of balancing life and their time and school. We kind of focus on the academics and hopefully they make it, but the reality is if they're not well, if they're holistically not taken care of, it's very difficult and actually impedes anything they try to plan ahead when it comes to academic work. So, very interesting stats. Readiness is a key factor. I know when they were talking about an introduction, they spoke about early detection. It is so important. What we found, there's actually a national survey that went out, and 87% of those seniors want to go to college, right? But 42% of those same students they surveyed after their first year, they felt that they were unprepared to meet the expectations of college. So how can we help that? Of course, this is going to be new, and again, transition is only temporary, but it's going to be very new for your student, for yourself. But the reality is you can actually help them now and throughout their first year. But your role is going to be a little bit different. You're actually going to be spending more time getting your student ready, because you're no longer the project manager, the person saying, hey, make sure you do this. You're actually now the consultant and the coach, because there's choices, like we spoke about, those transitions that they're dealing with, that they actually have to start making for themselves in order to be successful, in order for it to stick. And then that way, past just their first year, they can end up continuing in successful behavior. So how can you help? We're talking about a lot of practicalities. First and foremost, and these are things we're actually going to stay on just for a little bit, just to elaborate, because I think we can talk about, hey, there's all these problems, but the solution can be seen as, oh, it's simple. So first and foremost, you'll notice educate, empower, engage. Slowly but surely, you'll see that where you educate first, then you empower, and then you engage, your checklist should actually go down. The reason why is that your student in and of itself will actually start building themselves up in order to make these choices towards success. So first and foremost, under educate, it's important that you instill a habit where you both read everything, get a full understanding of what's needed. What might have happened, you might have gotten thousands of pamphlets of schools, information about FAFSA, things that are necessary in order for them to not only get their documentation in, to be admitted, but also what goes into orientation and all of that. But it's necessary you do it together. It's not going to be a learning experience if they don't see, one, that you're not going to provide what's the bite-sized content for them. That won't help them towards their first year. But also, if there's a team, there's a partnership involved when you do those things together. Secondly, you're going to be developing a practice of asking questions with and to your student. So instead of the things that you know to be conscientious of and to pay attention to, asking them those questions instead of going to the university itself is really beneficial, because then that instills in them a reasoning of, oh, I never even thought of that. And then they start asking those questions. A third part of educating your student in order to take care of this transition is being realistic and specific regarding financial concerns. Now is the time, and that's why Educate is the longest checklist you'll deal with, because before that they leave you, before that they go into this new step, this new transition into their life, it's important that they do it with you. These concerns of like, did you think about how you're going to budget? Did you think about balancing work with school? And what does that look like? That brings me to actually create a plan of academic success now. No, you might not know the classes that you will be taking this next semester. However, I found it's so beneficial outside of for seniors specifically, that you actually take this time of what would your day actually look like? What would your week look like? Where would you fit things in? Because the reality is they're charged with figuring that out once they're already in class, and most of the times it's too late. So they could really use your help if you took the time to educate right then and there. And maybe if you would think about things that they wouldn't themselves when it comes to creating their own academic success plan, per se. And then lastly, something that I know you're getting a lot of information, but it's so pertinent, get to know those campus resources. From counseling services, disability resources, the writing center, whatever your university has, your university or college has, it's so important to know. Because in the reality, no, your student might not need that now, but they might. And if they don't know what it is, they don't know how to utilize it. There's been studies, so many, where students, they lose sight of, they get to a point, especially in their first year, where they don't realize what resources are out there. And so there is a sense of, I have nothing else and I'm left with no other options. Provide them with those options now so that they'll always have something to turn to for that first year and even after. So that brings us, so Educate, there's a lot of hands in there, but notice it's different. It's a partnership. So we move on to Empower. Empower is where you start to set clear expectations between the student and the parent responsibilities. The things that the student was supposed to concern themselves of now differ from what you concern themselves. And the reason why is because there's no way that they'll be able to build their own responsibility towards those things unless those expectations are made. So who's going to, how when it comes to money is built up, how is the time supposed to be sent? That brings us to, it allows them to make their own individual choices. Now, what I will say, as we all know, we might make mistakes, but that's okay, and it's necessary to help them. If you've done your part to educate them, then that choice will totally take care of it. That choice will be based off of they recognize that they felt that they made an educated choice, and if it ended up being something that they can improve on, they learned from it. What that brings me to is you need to hold them accountable for their performance and their behavior, whether that be academically, budgeting. If not, then they lose sight of how to manage themselves as individuals in this transition. And then lastly, of course, hopefully during that empowering stage, they are going to learn from those choices. And then lastly, and the smallest checklist you have. So this is actually something, these 3 stages can take place anywhere from the beginning of you looking into colleges all the way until the middle or end of the first year, engage. It is totally crucial to have positive affirmations for them, recognizing that the choices that they're making are their own. We spoke about the social and emotional competencies, the things that they're delving into. It's necessary, because if not, what ends up happening, they can't move forward if they don't start with a win. And we want them to start with a win. A second part of the engage stage is staying connected and understanding what are the boundaries for that, whether that be weekly, monthly, or whatever it's agreed upon. Staying connected, both you as a parent and the student, it's necessary. And then lastly, provide reassurance without rescuing. I know a lot of times that could be difficult to watch some of your students' choices, but it's imperative, because if not, academic success, it's very difficult. We spoke about the transitions that they're going through, whether that be academic or wellness. But in the end, you have to build them up so that they can make those choices themselves without seeing that someone was going to come and rescue. So I know we covered a lot. We covered a lot about the practicalities. We spoke about the transition. But what I'm most interested in, if anything, is this question and answer part. Because the reality is your concerns and your specific towards your situation is necessary, and it actually just might help any of our other attendees. So while I'm here, I will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Aisha. Absolutely. So we're going to invite our audience to send in your questions and drop them in the question box. And while we're preparing for those, Aisha, just to reiterate your message with the 3 E's, I really love that it's easy to remember, but so powerful. So educate, empower, and engage. And the fact that it's really not just about academics, but also wellness and surviving all of the other factors that come with transitioning. So thank you for sharing that information. The first question, Aisha, related to timing. So you talked about readiness being a key factor, and so many students think about this change and this transition even in middle school. Can you talk about how early students and parents can get started preparing and getting into this mindset to be ready?
Well, the good news is time management is not something that's age specific. I work actually with individuals who, from both freshmen who are coming in from high school all the way into individuals who are adult learners coming back. And what we found is time management is necessary regardless. It just looks a little bit different. When you are specifically in middle school or high school, you're dealing with how do you plan. Something that's really beneficial is providing them a blank schedule, creating, I believe, maybe four categories and maybe four markers of this is where school is, this is where chores are, this is where homework is and extracurricular, and having them place it in there. I know a lot of times as parents we can create that for them and then be like, hey, this is your schedule. But what's actually more imperative is when they are making it themselves, they recognize, oh, this is how much time is needed or spent for this. And right now, where we are in this transition when it comes to seniors moving over and making that decision and going to college, it's even more imperative because now it's not just those things, but okay, when are you going to cook for yourself? When are you going to do laundry? And so sometimes we forget those things when we think about time management. We particularly think class and homework, but the reality is, just like you, they're having a life. And so it's really pertinent for them to have that placed within a schedule just so that they themselves can gauge and see, okay, this is how I'll switch up my schedule if anything goes awry.
Absolutely. And I can see those skills being put into place as you join the workforce and as you move on to even your next journey. So very good. Now, are there additional resources, Aisha, for students to consider if they are first-generation students and maybe they don't have all the support pieces in place?
Yes, actually, something that I really appreciate, the way education is going is very focused on that demographic, which I appreciate. I was actually first generation. And as someone, sometimes you have to figure those things out by yourself, but luckily enough, the university itself has those, whether it be departments or resources themselves. Usually what I've seen is that it's based off of that orientation. If you have an opportunity to go to an orientation, please do. I know that time can be of the essence, but it's necessary because there's a lot of like these little, niche things specifically for first generation and a couple of other populations where they're able to provide different things necessary because it's just different. Some of us haven't had some of those support systems, and for your university, it might already be involved so that you can start off on the right foot.
Great, that's a great tip. Aisha, if students are considering several institutions and getting ready to explore so many options, are there tips that you typically share to help students and parents narrow their options, maybe make the best decision on the best fit for a college or university? I
do actually. So first and foremost, I look to see what the university itself has been focusing on. Whether that be research, enhancements in this way, those things really decide of, okay, this is what this university as a whole, or maybe this program as a whole is focusing on. I want to be a part of that. That type of engagement keeps you connected, even if other things occur in a student's life cycle. Engagement, I know they tell you all the time, the different places you've been, engagement's very important, but it's necessary because you know it as well as I, when things get rough, you need something to be like, I still want to be a part of that, so that's what I'm going to hold on to. I think that is actually one of the biggest things outside of class size is important, like how big the institution is in itself is important, but what I usually am looking for is, what are they trying to do? Do I have an opportunity to take part in it? And then secondly, are there resources for someone like me?
That's a great tip. And sort of transitioning into that, Asia, the next question is, how do you actively stay involved when your student is going out of state for school?
It's possible, I promise. I know that it's, one, I'm not sure about your feelings towards that. There might be mixed. There might be like, this is great, this is concerning, I don't know how it's going to go. But one, there's actually a point, I believe in the Engage slide where we talked about staying connected. It's very important for you to decide, what does that look like between you and your student? Because when you adhere to that, whether that mean a text or a call weekly or whatever that means, like that staying connected part to your student, and you hold to that, so beneficial. And it does make a change. And because if anything, think about it, that's one of the consistent things that your student can hold on to, this adhered to type of schedule when it comes to staying connected and what you guys agreed upon. Secondly, when it comes to the university itself, I try to do my own place when it comes to research. I know a lot of universities or colleges or institutions, they actually have pretty good programs when it comes to parent and family. And I guess that's something that I didn't have growing up, and it's very beneficial. I see now that it kind of puts you in there without you having to do a lot of the research, which is necessary. You have your own life, but at least then you can still stay connected to the institution and thus to your student.
Okay, great. Another question, Asia. Would you recommend that students live on campus, regardless of how far or close they are to home, at least during that first year?
There is a mixed view on that, and it really depends. So when we talk about the competencies before of what your student is going through, I think the difference between any of those choices, one has to do with their ability to make their individualized choices. Like, are you able to still support them in this way without rescuing them while they're at home? But also a big part that we just have to be pretty clear about is, financially, is it the wisest thing? So when we're talking about in the educating part of what are they doing when it comes to taking care of themselves, if that's set, then whether it's living on campus or living at home, they're able to solidify themselves as an adult and as their first year of college. I think it's totally possible to stay as engaged as possible outside of whether you live on campus or not.
That's a good thought. Asia, for students that maybe have a disability or something along those lines, if you're thinking of going to college, can you share some resources or extra things or additional offices or places on campus they need to visit to make sure they are successful in that transition as well?
Yes, definitely. I would always say, and that's why I was talking about orientations before, register with your Disability Resource Center. That program in itself, that department, what I find is that they're so holistic. It's not necessarily that they're just registering them and then they'll just help them academically. It goes from time management, a lot of the things that we actually spoke about when it comes to competencies that they take care of. I've seen that when you're registered with a particular department, or you're utilizing services such as like counseling for psychological services or different things like that, it keeps you connected so that individuals are not just looking at you as an academic, but as an individual, holistically. Because in reality, like we saw before, one affects the other always. So specifically for any individuals who are interested in those types of resources, get registered. Do it sooner, regardless of whether or not you feel like it's pertinent. It helps. It does, because it gives you another resource in order to turn to when it comes to the middle of the year.
Thank you, Aisha. And sort of to follow up on that question, for students with disabilities, are there any restrictions in programs or colleges they should be applying to? What would be your recommendation? Do you know of any programs that maybe should not be considered? I'm trying to make sure I read the question correctly, but any recommendations related to that?
Okay. Well, I think that was a very interesting question, because I guess the thought behind that question is you want to make sure that your student is going for the right types of programs, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But if anything, when it comes to the research stage, and I know I was talking about, when it comes to picking institutions and can I be a part of things, I always look to see, first and foremost, are there resources involved? If there's resources involved in the institution itself, of course, if it was in a program, even better, but in the institution itself, then it would bypass any types of programs related. What I've at least worked in my own university, our disability resources is associated. So regardless what you're trying to do, they're trying to take care of where you as an individual are. And I think that's what is most beneficial.
Great. Thank you so much, Aisha. I think that is the end of our questions here. So I want to thank you for sharing such a wealth of resources and tips today. It was so helpful to think about it, easy to remember, but so powerful again. So thank you for sharing that information. I do want to remind our audience that the recorded session along with Aisha's presentation will be shared on our website after Virtual College Week. And our website is virtualcollegeweek.org. If you would like to learn more about financial aid, college success, and how parents can continue to help in the process, you can join us at 4, 5, or 6 o'clock Eastern this afternoon. You can sign up for all of the Virtual College Week live webinars, again, at virtualcollegeweek.org. Thank you, Aisha. Again, we appreciate you joining us today, and thank you for joining us to our audience.
Thank you.